Okay, now to get user registration working, one of the first things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to update our users object, because we're going to need a username field on here and a password field on here. So let's see the Drizzle magic. So down here, we'll just say username, and we'll set this to text, and we will say, and then, so now we have the username field, and then the next thing that we need is our password. And we will make that text also, and we'll make that password, close that out. So now these are the two fields that we're going to need for our authentication. So now that we've added our text name and our username, let's try and get this migrated. So let's run this npm command to start this migration. So let's do npm drizzle generate SQLite. And so it's showing there's new stuff, and I want to create this column. I want to create the column. Created a column in user table, created a rename from another column. No. I don't want to create the column or renamed. That's bizarre. Okay, so it updated it. And let's take a look at what my this will be the second migration script. And so it renamed timestamp to create it at, and it added my username, and then it added my password. So now let's push these. Okay, so looks like it's gonna have to remove my users to get this in there, but that's okay. So yes, let's remove the table, and then hopefully it should have created a new table. So let's check that by doing drizzle-kit and we have our user table. Let's refresh and make sure. First name, last name, age, username, password, created at. So I have all the rows that I need. I lost the data, but that's okay. Because we definitely needed to add these fields to this record. Okay, so let's go back to our app, and we've now migrated the stuff over, and let's see how we're going to use them. I think the best approach is probably to base our registration off of this user post. So let's do that. So you can see here we've created this register post, which is the exact same code that we originally had in the users post, but we need to make a couple of changes to this because right now it's just pushing the password straight through, which is definitely not what we want, because we definitely need to hash that. But other than that, I think everything else should be fine. So let's right here say we need to basically hash the password. So hash. And what we want to do here is we're going to push the whole body through, but we're going to say password is going to be equal to hash. Right? And so what we'll do here is we will say const hash password. And then now let's import bcrypt to hash our password for us. So we've imported bcrypt. I need to let me install that. Go down here and stop everything. Okay. And then now we need to basically hash the password using bcrypt. And Oh, hashed. I typed that wrong, so let's just change hashed. So now we are going to hash our password. We will save our hash password. So basically this is pushing everything over. Then we'll hash the password to overwrite the default password that was passed in from the body password. And then we will take that and we'll insert that new user into the database and we'll return. And so this is something that, let's see, I'm getting a bcrypt. So let me add the types. Maybe that's what the problem is. So let's copy that. Create another shell so I don't have to stop this again. Save. And that fixed that. So let's test this with our Thunder client. See what our users copy is. So let's say users, and we want to post. So let's change it to a post. And then we need to provide username and password. And what are the other fields? Username, password first. Okay, and now let's see if this works. Except I don't want to call users, I'm calling register. Missing that comma. All right. Cannot read properties undefined reading name. Sorry. I provided the database name, not the object name. So you can see how they're structured. So let me go back and fix that. So this should be name, and this should be last name. And let's see if we get a different result this time. So we did. So it added my new user. Let's take a look at our Drizzle Studio, which I think I stopped. So let's start Drizzle Studio up in another window, and let's just keep it going. I'll get that right eventually. Okay, so here's my user that it added. Here's the ID, the age. It has a hashed password, and the data was created. So we have our register user endpoint corrected, and implemented. Now we need to do our login user. Let's use the basics of our post. Of our register user for our login user. So let's get that going. Rename this. And we're going to say login. And we know it's a post. All right, so let's start over again. What we're going to get from our body, what we need our username and our password. Right, so let's just change this to say username, comma, password. All right, and we'll just change this to that because that's how we want to hash the password to get our hash password to compare it. And then what we need to do is we need to get our user. Let's remove this insert user because we're not going to insert a user here. Remove this because we're not going to insert a user here. We just need this because we need to hash the password. Now we need to do a select to get our user based on their username. And we can look back at some code we wrote in the first video to give us an idea of how we want to do that. So if we go over and we take a look at get a user by ID, you can see kind of how it works. We want to execute this query right here where you select from users, but our equal will be the username to match the username that got passed in. So let's copy this code here and let's close our SQLite service. We don't need this. We don't need this. We don't need this. We don't need this. And we don't need our delete. Where did our... Here's our login. Okay. So let's come over here and execute our query. And let's import the missing things. We need our equal, which we've used before. We know that works. And then what we want here is our username. And we're going to say if users dot username, why is this complaining? Equal, oh, I don't want to parse int, that's why it's complaining. So let's remove that. Okay. Did I remove one too many? I think I did. Yeah, there we go. So now this user response will give us back a user if it finds one that matches. Okay, and the way to check that is, let's do this. If there's not user response, then throw a new error. We'll just say user not found. Found, and then that gets caught down here at the bottom, and then the error message will get sent back. So now that we have our user back, the next thing we need to do is we need to compare our passwords, and we're going to use another function that we get from bcrypt. And what we do is we're going to compare the password that was passed in with our hashed password, and if it is false, then we'll throw in valid credentials. If it's true, then we're going to return a user, and then we need to get rid of the password because we don't want the password going back. So let's see, can I just set this to null or undefined? It won't let me set it to undefined because it's not an optional parameter, so let me just set this to null. And then we'll send no password back. I know there's a way to do it with destructuring, but for the purpose of, I don't know off the top of my head, I have to Google it. So for the purpose of this should be correct, and then this should be auth user. So let's change this here to make this auth user, and then we'll return the authenticated user if successful. Otherwise, all these conditions, we throw an error for invalid credentials. Here we throw an error for user not found, and then we should get our user. So let's go and test it with our Thunder client. Okay, so we're here. We have our API login. We're passing two credentials, username and password. We know I already registered that user. Hold on. So I've already registered this user Aaron, and there's the hashed password. So now let's try to authenticate. And so you see we got my user Aaron, my password's been cleared out. I'll fix that next time because I don't like that, that's bugging me. If I pass in some other stuff, I get my 400, user not found, user not found. And if I do a bad password, invalid credentials. So now we've tested our login endpoint. So now let's integrate it into our application. Let's close this. We have our login post. And we have our register. So these two guys are ready to go. So let's update here inside of our authorize function. So we don't want to do any of this. All we want to do is, if successful, return a user, right? So first let's make this async. And then let's get rid of this user. And then let's get rid of this. And then up here is where we're going to do our authentication. And for the purpose of this, we're just going to do everything right inside of, should we? Yeah, for the purpose of this right now, we'll just do everything right inside of this one file to keep it simple. And then in the next video, we'll kind of separate everything out. So in here, we basically want to make our API call. And let's go back, because the cool thing about Thunder is that it will just give you the code, so you don't have to kind of figure it all out. So where is that? So let me send. I get my response. Where is so response, cookies, results, docs, snippet. All right, and so now we have our snippet down here, and we're going to use node. Gives us everything we need, and then it gives us the fetch. So let's just copy this. Let's just drop this in here for now. Like I said, this is just what we're going to do for now. We will clean all this stuff up later. We can remove the client. Here's going to be our body, and all we're going to do here is we are going to... All right, they have the string hard-coded, but we need to turn this into an object. And then we are going to set this to the credentials. And then this is the credentials for the password. And so now we have our options, but we do need to, so this does need to be string, so JSON stringify, let's wrap that object, Okay, and since I am an await guy, let's kind of fix this, so and then we'll do the fetch, and then we will do a and then we'll get our JSON back, and then we'll get rid of all this stuff, and we'll change this to a response RESP. Format this again. So we set our URL, we do our post. We pass this stringified parameters in of username and password. We do our fetch. We get our response. One thing I like to do is if response.OK. Okay. Response not okay. Then we return null, because that is what this says. You return null. So we're just going to jump and we'll return null here. Otherwise, if it is good, then we know we have a user, and what we will do is we will just return the JSON. So we can just call this user then. And let's see, it's still got this else. I think that I can remove it because of the way I'm handling it. So let's take this out. All right. So I'm authorizing my credentials. If I have no error, if I have an error, then just return null. Otherwise, get my user and go. All right, so let's try this out. If it works the first time, I'll be happy but surprised. Okay. So first, let's sign out. We know these are bad credentials. Let's see what happens. Sign in failed. Check the details you provided. So those credentials did not work. Let's try Aaron and password. Those credentials did work, but you see we got our credentials, but we have some interesting data here for our users. We're not getting our user object passed back because there's specific information that it expects to come back for the user. And let me see if I can find that in the documentation. Okay, and so there's custom session and data that you're going to return inside of authjs. And so here you see it says guide explains how to add custom data to the user session. To expand or change customized session data, you need to do the following steps: return custom data from the authorized function, and then add callbacks. So we are returning custom data. And so all we need to do now is add the callbacks. And so let's go down here to this session. So we're going to copy this session callback. And so notice the callbacks are outside of the providers. See? So let's go back to our code. And our providers are here. So let's go up here. Callbacks. Okay, so we want to return a session. So let's do this. Let's say session.user is going to be equal to session.user and then everything that we have in our token. And then we resolve this promise as a session. And let's see if that gets us what we're looking for. So I'm back to my app. Let's try to log in. And we get all this stuff, but I'm still not getting my user data. So let me see what's going on. Well, first let's check, what am I returning? So response OK, response JSON, return user. Let's just console log this. And then we should see the results down here. So let's sign out. And let's sign back in. And so I'm returning this auth user object. That's the mistake. So let's change our login and just return the contents of auth user, which would be our user. Actually, what am I doing? All I got to do is this. Okay, and let's confirm that. Let's go back to our Thunder client. Let's do our login. So that's why everything wasn't playing nice. So let's go back to our code. And if we want to go all the way back to our auth. So now I'll return my user, and let's see, we should get some different results here. So let's run the app. Let's sign out. Sign in with credentials. My user object is coming back, first name, last name. So there's everything on my user. And then now let's see what's going on in my callback. Okay, so it looks like what they're doing here in the documentation is that they're passing the additional information in the token. So they're getting the user role and this data access token. They're returning them. And then what you have here, when the callback, when the web token is created, you have the user object. So the trick is we need to pass any information that we want from the user object to the token and then pull it off the token here inside this session. So let's add the additional information that we need to the token and then pull it off the token down here at the bottom. Let's copy this JWT as one of our callbacks and add it up here. We have no access token. We do want to get the user ID. I mean, do we want all of this information? I mean, like, what do we really need? At a minimum, we need the user ID. And let's see, what else are we getting back? And we need the minimum user ID and username. So we'll just pass those two. So username. So we'll say ID, username. And then down here, we're going to add to the session user. We'll take everything that's on the user already, and then we'll add the two values from the token, which is the ID and the username. And then I think that should give us what we want. So let's save this. Let's see what's going on in our application. Let's see if we'll refresh, get it. No, let's sign out, sign in, and now we have the information that we want. So inside of our user, we have all this information. Really, we just wanted the name and the ID was the important information that we needed. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover on the login. I guess now I need to add the create user UI. So let's kind of quickly add that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to leverage this register function. Register API call that we made. We're not going to make this UI pretty. We're just going to get something basic to kind of get the users into the system so we can show how it all works. So let's just get something simple built here. So okay, so to save us time, I just dropped in some code for the kind of layout of a registration screen. Kind of this is what it looks like. We have our username, our password, our first name. We change that to last name and our age. So let me fix that. So first name, last name, and then our age. And then what we're doing is we have refs set up for each one of them. Then inside of our register here is where we need to make the API call. And to keep things simple, our API call is going to look very similar to this call. So let's just copy all of this. And go into our register view, and inside of here where it says do register, we'll drop in the code. Clearly we don't want to log in. We want to call our register. And then it's a post, that is correct. And then we need stringify our body. So we need our username, our password. But remember, these are refs, so we need their value. And then we need the same thing for our first name, our last name, and age. First name, so we have our body that needs to get sent over. Username, password, first name, last name, age. And then let's make this async. And same thing, we'll make our call. If there's no response, then return null. Actually, let's do better than that. Let's say, how do I want to handle this? I don't want to return my user there. That's first of all. Let's wrap the whole thing to try catch block to make our life easier. So try, and then we're gonna no, because we want this to happen at the end. So we'll do a catch here. Alert, and the alert will be e.message. And then this will be finally. So no matter what happens, let's reset all the fields. Okay, and then so what we can do here is if it's not okay, we can just return, actually we'll just throw new error, and with response dot message response dot status text. So we'll throw the status text. Otherwise, we'll assume we have a user. We'll log out the user, and then we need to navigate to the index page. So we need the router. Let's change that to router. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's stop this and rebuild everything. Let's test this. Let's go up here and just put a back button. It's like, why is this not getting picked up, even though it appears to be working? But we'll try and test our registration page just to make sure we're getting users registered. And then once we check that, we will connect everything back to auth. So let's go back to our app. We're going to say Aaron2. We're going to leave our password as password. We're going to say 2 Aaron. And we're going to set the age at 45. Let's see if this works the first time. And it did. So you can see it registered a new user. What's interesting is that I'm not authenticating a user, I'm just registering him, so I probably need to add that authentication status to it. So let's sign out. So just to let you know what's going on is that, remember, we needed to turn off, where's my configuration? So remember, we turned off the global app middleware so I can test my registration page. So that's why we're still sitting here on this page, even though we're not authenticated. So it's good that we're seeing the data. But what we didn't do is, if you recall, if I go to register, and then let's look at the source code for register, all we do is we create the user account. We're not actually logging in a user. And so we need to add that login function here also. And what's happening, it's getting really crowded in here now. So it's almost like I really do need to move all this code out to a separate function. But luckily, I believe there is a shortcut that will get us around this. And that is the fact that you can actually call the sign-in function on the off of the auth. So I think I can do this. So let's go back to my index view. And I think, where is this? I think that if I remember correctly, I believe there's a sign-in function off this auth. Let's take a quick look at the documentation. So if we get a look here on this custom signup page, So they're saying here with use auth, and so they have this. I can get sign in off of use auth, and then I can just make this credentials call. And so we're gonna so what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to make this credentials call, this sign in call, after we create our account with the registered user. So let's go here. And let's go to register. Let's go up at the top here. And we're going to add our use auth. So we have our sign in from our use auth. And so what we'll do is, if we get the user created down here, before we push, we'll do our sign in. And then we remember credentials. Actually, let's go back and look at the doc exactly what to do it. Sign in. Quote credit. Let's just copy this to get it right. And then in here, we can just do value and then password.value. Okay, and why does it say sign in, sign in? Okay, so now we're going to attempt to sign in with the credentials based on the information that was provided to us when we registered the user. So let's try this register user again. Let's do Aaron 3. Password 3. Aaron. Okay, so it registered me. Let's go back. It added me, and it says I'm authenticated. Why did it not redirect? Let's try one more time. So it says push path. Maybe it is not. Maybe it's not asynchronous. Let's try again. Let's sign out. Aaron 4. That's what we wanted. Okay. So it moved over. It shows that we're authenticated and Aaron is logged in. Now, the last piece, and I still don't think this is right, because I saw it jump there, but we'll circle back around to the next one because this video is getting kind of long.